71% of all funding was done with treasury bills, not bonds, which is emblematic of a banana republic.
Explain why that transition is emblematic of, a banana republic, of like one of these third-rate countries where the rules don't really exist, right? Why is that atypical for a quote unquote real country?
A developed country, right? An advanced country, a country that's supposed to be fiscally responsible. Well, so if you ever work for an emerging markets desk or a developing markets desk in, at Goldman or JP Morgan, what you'll learn very quickly, especially if you're working with government bonds, is all of these third world countries cannot fund on the long end. So the rule is, it's almost like an 80-20 rule where 80% of their funding has to be done on the extreme short end and only 20% of their funding can be done farther out. So, you look at Argentina, you look at Peru, you look at Chile, you look at Thailand or Vietnam, most investors will only lend to them extremely short term because the issue is their fiscal situation is so volatile that it's extremely risky to predict their cash flows more than a few years out, because there's example after example of, developing market economies failing to pay their bondholders and just deciding to negate their obligations and pay instead, either social security programs, welfare programs, military buildup, what have you, whatever it is. They're more willing to break the rules in that way. And developed countries like Germany, the UK, and the US are supposed to be these beacons of, paragons of prosperity and responsibility. And so we're not supposed to be running, a fiscal situation like that, a fiscal strategy like that. Instead, we're supposed to do the opposite. So the rule is 20% short end and 80% long end. If you look at all the developed European economies as well as the US and Canada. And that evolution from the long end to the short end is part of the process of almost like the dying of faith in the federal government and in the fiscal strength of a country. So as we move further and further towards the short end, it's showing that investors in general, foreign central banks, private investors, domestic banks, domestic retail investors, they don't want to lend to the government anymore at long durations.